It is my great pleasure to introduce John Rice.
So, first of all, Kathleen, there you are. Thank you for the nice introduction, overly kind, and thank you to the Education Design Lab, Larry, Don, the entire team for engaging me. Michael, Dr. Lomax, can I call you Michael? Yeah. Right. Thank you as a dear friend and big champion of our work over the years, and someone who I'm a great admirer of, and thank you for all the universities here today for giving me the opportunity to share a little bit about what we're doing and to propose an innovation that I hope we can have an engaging discussion about. And so I will jump in, and I think what I'd like to do is give you a little bit of, I'll call it, kind of foundational understanding of our work, okay? And I'll do that because I think it's important for you all to understand the framing around which I will share the institutional innovation, which fundamentally is about thinking a little bit differently about how we prepare and connect our undergraduate students to post-college employers. Okay? How do we help our folks navigate that college to career transition? What do we do? What do we continue to do within our institutions? What do we ask of our employer partners and our graduate school partners? And what can we envision that needs to take place in between? Again, is the volume okay for folks? All right, so I will talk fast, and if just raise your hand if you like to, if I need to slow down, but I want to make sure I get through the discussion so that we can tee up the questions at the end. So Kathleen talked about this a little bit, but MLT is an organization I started about almost 15 years ago. We aspire to do four things. Number one is to create a much broader pipeline of senior leaders for our institutions and our communities, and a much broader pipeline coming behind. 1,000 and 10,000 is our goal, the near term. And we're looking; those people will also demonstrate a very powerful multiplier effect in our communities in attacking the critical issues that I think are plaguing our vulnerable communities across the country. And then in doing that, we're also going to transform the talent pipelines of major organizations in this nation. I don't need to talk about the challenges we have with underrepresentation of minorities. But I think the fourth piece, the lower left-hand corner, is something that I'm going to focus on today. Is really about reimagining how young people, how college students navigate that transition into the professional world. If we go back to our experiences when we were in college, we probably made a number of mistakes. We were figuring it out along the way. When someone had an opportunity, we looked at it, but we really weren't thinking, at least in my case, we weren't thinking as strategically. We weren't understanding where we wanted to go longer term and what the implications were for our near-term steps. We can put a lot more science into to this entire process, in my view. So quickly, what do we do? I know that's probably a pretty small slide there in terms of wording, but in a nutshell, MLT is actually a college through mid-career talent development system. Very comprehensive. We work at the undergraduate level, which is where we'll focus today, with a few programs that now, that serve about, at least at the undergraduate level, 500 new folks a year. Okay, freshmen, sophomores, juniors, seniors, and the goal is and those folks are say 65% are Pell eligible families, Pell eligible students, and many of them are from your schools. Over the past couple of years, we have probably 250 of our MLT fellows who are students at HBCUs and about representing about 15 HBCUs. So we look forward to expanding our reach, but we've got a very strong population already. And essentially at the undergraduate level, the experiences over the course of 12 to 18 months, our fellows have a deep dive experience with a coach who's a staff member who marshals them through a curriculum that's built on top of what they're doing in the classroom. They come to 3 or 4 seminars and skill development boot camps that are hosted by our corporate partners, and they work on a very personalized journey to to be prepared and get placed in the great internships and full-time jobs coming out of college that put them on the fast track. So that's the work that we do at the undergraduate level. At the MBA level, similar model, coaching, skill development seminars, again, integrated with the admissions officers from the grad schools, and it's about preparation to hit the bar, get into the major MBA programs and navigate that MBA career transition. And then post-MBA, we have a few programs that help people stay on the fast track through the key promotion thresholds toward the senior levels. So it's a handful, but our view is if we're going to move the needle at every stage of the talent pipeline and long-term develop senior leaders, you can't just be working at one level. You got to tackle this in a comprehensive way, focusing on talent development, focusing on recruitment and retention of diverse talent. We've had great results. We're serving, Kathleen mentioned, a rising leader population of 6,000 to date. Will be 7,000 by the end of the year. But essentially, we are working with 1,000 new folks a year. So from across the country, meaningful throughput. It's competitive to get in. We've had great results in terms of placement. For our undergraduate students, almost 100% are getting those fast-track entry-level jobs, and those jobs are paying them on average $70K starting salary. Wow. Okay, so $70K starting salary puts you in a position to pay down your debt as that salary goes up over, probably and in a way that is, if you have debt, more aggressive than. And with less stress than what most students are doing. Our corporate partners view us as a critical talent pipeline, and we're, we believe we're just scratching the surface of where we could be, the scale and the reach that we have on currently. So again, 1,000 students a year from 100 plus universities and colleges around the country, but we think we're still scratching the surface. Important to note that we've got now over 100, not including our 30 plus MBA program partners, we got 100 plus leading organizations, employers in the corporate sector, in entrepreneurial sector, in the social sector, and even some in the government sector that are not just recruiting our talent, but actually are actively engaged in helping to design, inform, and in some cases deliver the prep curriculum that our fellows go through. So these are long-term relationships, and I would say, with the combination of our highly engaged corporate partners, our coaching model that is, what we call sort of, our tough love coaching model that's very high touch, and the work that we do in the context of the 12 to 18 month, long-form curriculum, I would argue that we have the equivalent of a career services offering that is, that's distinct and significantly better than any university in the world. So, in addition to the results, we've learned a ton. Okay, and this is, I think, where begins to get even more relevant to our discussion around innovation. Having worked with 6,000 students, 100 plus employers, 30 plus graduate schools for 15 years with a high-touch curriculum, with boot camps, coaching sessions, admissions essays, we've got a ton of data points at the individual and at the institutional level. And those data points have informed the way not only that we execute our programs, but they've informed our understanding of the problem. And this is a nuanced problem, and I want to share, sort of one of the insights that I think is relevant to our discussion today. So this insight is really about, captures how smart in the academic world is actually defined differently in the professional world. What it takes to be a high performer is not the same. So to use these, to use the two kind of illustrations here, images, and I'm, speaking to a room of folks in academia, I will say up front, I'm totally oversimplifying this. So please forgive me, but it's really to make this to make the point. In the academic world, it's more like swimming in a lap pool, right? We tell you, you got a test coming up, you got a quiz, right? Once that quiz or test is complete or exam, we let you know what your grade is. You have a decent sense of how you're doing relative to your peers. And if you put your head down, master the material, right? You essentially control your destiny of how you do academically. Now, it's more complicated than that. There are a number of things, especially for our students, that can come up from the deep end of that pool and make it harder for you to get to the other side. But the destination is pretty clear. In the professional world, everything is different. We don't tell you if you're going to have a test or a quiz. We don't tell you when that's happening. Right? We don't tell you what grade you got. And we certainly make a point, in some cases it's sort of in our HR rules, we make a point not to tell you how you're doing relative to your peers, right? And so what defines your trajectory in the professional world is how it's your performance and how that shapes other people's perceptions of you. And those perceptions define where you end up. So in the professional world, it's much more of a team sport than it is in the academic world. Now, this is really reflective of everybody. This is not a minority thing at all, okay? But, and this is the second half of this first insight, which is that the gap between these two worlds is much wider for us, right? If you are lucky growing up today, okay, and most, too many folks don't have this. So if you're lucky, your parents are there telling you, hey, go out and get a great education and everything will take care of itself from there. Raise your hand if someone has been fortunate enough to have been told that at some time in your life, right? And because that's been the big frontier historically for us, okay? And so if you're focused solely on education, if you get a great education, everything will take care of itself. Essentially, what you're doing is doubling down on the academic construction of smart and high performance. And at the same time, for a lot of obvious reasons, we have more limited access to people who have been where we want to go and can tell us what high performance looks like. And also give us some prep and coaching advice on how to get there. Now, because and then the second piece of this loop is that if you don't have access to the folks who have been where you want to go, okay, then who do you turn to? You turn to folks who are in your closer networks, friends, family, who care deeply about you, almost by definition, haven't been where you want to go, even if they did go to college and are out in the professional working world or in academia. Somebody mentioned earlier, what about if a student is interested in the arts and their parents are really focusing on STEM, or the parent might be a lawyer, but if you want to go into technology, you don't know what that bar is. You don't have those relationships. So this is not a function solely of first-generation college students. This is everybody. But if you don't have access to the folks who can tell you how to navigate to that bar, then you have to turn to folks you do have access to. And in too many cases, we give the student, you get from those loved ones and friends very passionate but poorly informed guidance. You get the wrong playbook. You get the wrong understanding of what the bar is that you have to hit. So we've got so many of our students, hardworking, talented, scrappy, high ambitions, okay, who actually just are playing this game with one hand behind their back. They don't know what the bar is. And if you don't know where the bar is, you don't know where you stand relative to the bar. And you can work hard as hell, but you still will, may fall just short. And this is the loop that's happening in, I would call it, sort of that in between our universities and employer America today. It's an internal bleed, a slow bleed. You talk to employers and they'll say, well, that person just fell just short. They weren't quite as competitive as the other one. And they justify, that discussion on an individual sort of case-by-case basis. And it seems, you can look at it and says, maybe that's right. But then you look at the last 10, 20, 30 decisions, they're all the same. And we get screwed every time. And this is what's happening quietly behind the scenes. But unfortunately, just an internship or a scholarship will not solve this problem. Okay, so what would, right? And I want to. Here's the point about. I would argue what has become the really that framed our insight and become the secret sauce for our work at MLT. And the answer is, what solves this is actually something relatively simple. It's if we give our young people the winning professional playbook, and that tough love coaching to execute the playbook, everything changes, right? And we talk about the playbook, we're really saying three core things. One is what we call personal clarity. You got to be in the right lane, right? And that right lane is defined by an analysis of your strengths, your passions, your interests, and this isn't just about kind of finding the path that's most interesting, but it's finding the path where you can be outstanding. Okay, and it's also being clear enough about that so you can say no to opportunities that come your way that are good opportunities, but not the ideal opportunity. So the personal clarity is key. The second piece, what we call knowing the bar, this is the big disconnect that we've found in this entire space. Okay, and that is, we live in a job description world. Okay, and as opposed to a world where you understand from the lens of the people who are making the decisions on who gets hired, and then later on who gets promoted, how do they make that decision? Instead of the job description, it's what's the profile of the last 10, 20, 30 people who actually got the job and are now high performers? Okay, from the standpoint of their skills, what are they really able to do well? From the standpoint of their experience and accomplishments, what can they get done? From the perspective of their relationships, who is leaning in on their behalf? So if you know what the bar is, right, then you can develop a roadmap that actually gets you to that bar. But just like when we all are trying to go to the gym and get in better shape, if you've got someone there meeting you at 6 a.m. in the morning, you're going to be a lot more likely to execute that roadmap. So the coaching that drives what we call coaching that really helps to translate the bar, that helps to integrate the person into the path, but holds the individual accountable to execute their roadmap, provides that tough love, and actually engages them very much on a personal level, because in order to do this right, you have to understand and know the person. And then the second piece of coaching is really the peer level. The folks that are around you who are raising your game, who are going through it together, and other folks that have been maybe are one step beyond, who can provide great advice. So the playbook, the coaching, and obviously the connections to great opportunities. This is what this has been the secret sauce and what unlocks individual potential, and we'll use this as a frame later on for the innovation that I'll share. So I want to tie this to sort of what's happening in your worlds right now. And again, I will, it's one slide, so I'm sort of oversimplifying it. But in today's world, what do you have? Okay, and you've got you got the universities on one end, you got the employers on the other end, and folks have similar goals, for our young people, but you all are speaking different languages, and in some cases have competing priorities. So you all are, and again, I'm oversimplifying, focusing on making sure that your students acquire the right knowledge and master the right things, some foundational skills that will serve them well, critical thinking, and as well as what they're doing more broadly outside the classroom in terms of leadership. And but your curriculum historically, at the university level, is really not intended, and arguably should not be intended, to teach to the employer test directly. Okay, we can debate that, but that's my perspective. And then you got your career services office sitting somewhere on campus. Okay, So that's the language that's your world. The other side of this is that, yeah, organizations, companies, they're trying to, to efficiently find great folks. Sure, right? But guess what? At the individual level, at the corporate level, they're trying to minimize hiring risk. That's their job, right? And how do you do that? By hiring people who resemble the people who you hired before who came in and did well, right? So that's their business. And they can't do it everywhere. They got to find a way to do it efficiently, and they do it through networking. And these are the things that just propel and expand the wealth gap that we see, and so many other, I think, problematic things in our communities. And they also, when I mentioned this point about hiring bar and not transparent. If you all ask them, and I'm sure you've been to conferences and discussions around skills. And you ask recruiters and companies, and say, well, what are you looking for? Tell us what you're looking for. They say, well, we're looking for folks with good problem-solving skills, communication skills. We want folks who are strong project managers, can get it done, are flexible thinkers. They'll tell you all those things. Right? Who's heard those things before? Right? Right? Those are the things that you get on a job description. Right? But the problem is, you can... the only thing that matters is actually, well, how good do my problem-solving skills have to be? How do I demonstrate that I have the project management skills that are good enough to excel in your organization, right? So corporate, the employer America is great at defining broadly what those skills are, but they're not good at making the bar transparent. So if you can pull the bar out from them, all right, then you got something that actually you all can think about and that students can understand and manage too. So essentially right now, students have to learn both these languages, right? And then they got to translate, and that's a lot to do, right? And that's why we're, that's essentially why career outcomes across America for undergraduates are not what they could be. All right, so begin to paint a picture for what it could look like, what tomorrow's world could include. And essentially, the point here is that you all could, and I would argue, should stay in your sweet spot. Continue to focus on your core academic mission, right? But be able to offer a robust career services offering that drives even better outcomes, right? And at the other side, corporations, employers, let them stay in their sweet spot. But all we're going to get from them is the data on who, I should say, the profiles, the data and the profiles of who they've actually, the last 5 or 10 hires in the jobs that they're looking to fill. That's actually what defines the bar. Because if you can look like and present like and have the same skills and the same experience that the folks they've hired in the past, then that is the bar. And they have that data. And that's the kind of data that we at MLT have been getting from these organizations. That's one of the key insights. They will give it to you if you ask the right questions. But in most cases, recruiters don't understand this challenge the way we do. So you have to lead them along. So this is the opportunity to put students in a different position so they can hit that hiring bar, get the jobs that they want. So what would this look like? Okay? What would this new world look like? And what I would argue is that it could be an offering with 3 core components. And think about it from, imagine yourself or reimagine yourself as an undergraduate student at your school, right? And you have at your fingertips on your mobile phone or on your computer 24-hour access, okay, to a personalized playbook. This is your playbook, right? And that playbook is going to be curated by a coach. And that coach is going to be somebody who has experience in your world. If your world is an aspiring entrepreneur in the arts world, if your world is someone in Wall Street, if your world is someone who is a software developer at a tech company, that's who you get, right? And within the context of that, the experience on that playbook is going to include that personal clarity and discovery process. You're going to have a roadmap, what I would argue sort of is a parallel curriculum built on top of what you're doing in the classroom that focuses on maximizing college from the frame of solving for the story that the student wants to tell by the time they're a senior to employers. And that's a different way to navigate, which I'll talk about, the college experience. Career preparation and skill development modules, a content library of bar-hitting examples. You need to see whether it's video, okay, which I'm happy to show you, or it's your profile, your skill sets. You need to be able to assess where you are relative to the bar, and because this isn't something that we grow up with a keen understanding of. And this platform that you're going to have is going to give the universities a incredible real-time understanding of what's happening. The data and analytics, not just on outcomes, but on engagement and who and how your students are taking advantage of the platform. Okay, what their coaches are saying about them, what they're saying about their coaches, and about the content, right? And then again, this is not something, as I mentioned before, you can give someone a roadmap and a playbook and expect them to go do it on their own. Will not happen. It's got to be curated, and it's got to be led by what I would call that tough love from the coach, and that's multiple coaching sessions, deliverables, right? That will support the student. Right? Meet them where they are, but also hold them accountable. And the coach is not a volunteer mentor. This is someone who is paid and is accountable to the student. Feedback on prep assignments, readiness assessments, the kinds of personal problem solving, things that are going on in our lives that are incredibly relevant, that cannot be divorced from your undergraduate and career prep journey. And then finally, the payoff, right? We've got an incredible network of hiring organizations that are dying for your talent. As long as those folks hit the bar, right? And that can be regionally constructed as well, okay? Combination, and that's really from an employer standpoint. A few last slides that will probably give you too much detail, but from a standpoint of what this curriculum could look like, again, it starts with personal clarity. This is a proprietary exercise that we've developed that is incredibly powerful for our young folks, and it really to understand what your lane is, to get clarity on that. Again, that evolves over time, but important to have a starting point. And then once you have that personal clarity, you begin to think about 1 or 2 or 3 tracks. Now that CPG means consumer goods and retail, but it could be everything from that to Wall Street, to grad school, to entrepreneurship, to social sector, right? Really building around the student, and then development modules, developmental modules that are focused around sort of the nuts and bolts of the recruiting and prep process, but also the academic and academic navigation and the kind of, I would call those the skills that we build the foundation on in the undergraduate experience, but are part and parcel of how you are defined, and how people view you in terms of ready and smart in the professional world. So structured communication, analytical problem solving, things like that kind of applied skills that everyone needs to sort of flex some different muscles in and get some experience in. And then the relationship piece, industry and technical knowledge. So development modules, the personal coaching, which I talked about, and then as we think about the bar, just one sort of mapping out of what an individual experience would look like. And so when we say that bar, I mentioned skills and competencies, what you can do well, okay? Accomplishments, experience, what you've done, and then relationships, who is leaning in on your behalf, okay? And then story, how do you bring that all together? If right? If I were able to share with you the story, I'll call it the profile, which essentially is the bar for the people who are actually getting those jobs, right? Along those 4 dimensions. How they're telling their story, what they're good at, what they've done, and who's leaning on their behalf, then I can compare every student to that bar. And then from there, that drives the action plan. That's the the essence of the curriculum, the coaching experience, is just prepping folks to hit that bar, right? Totally changes, takes all the ambiguity out of this entire process, which I would argue is the crux of the problem, because it plays to the old boy networks that we have more limited access to, right? The more ambiguous you make it, the harder it is for folks who don't know the intricacies of the game, if you don't have those relationships, all right? And then, sort of how it integrates into the academic, I should say the undergraduate sort of overall experience and sort of the maximizing college roadmap. A lot here, but the point here is that when we think about things like your academics, your extracurriculars, your the relationships, your career prep, your professional skills, think about this. The framing should be, what do I want to be able to say in terms of my story by the time I'm a senior? Let's paint the picture of let's define success by senior year, and then let's build up to that, work back to freshman year, and focus on the things that you need to do, the milestones that will get you there by senior year. Now, if we start you as a junior, right, then you got a year, right? If we have 2 years, then we can build up, even more. But the point is that undergraduates today are not thinking about it this way. They're thinking about, I'm a freshman, okay? I need to get to sophomore year. I need to figure out my major. I need to build relationships, figure out what I'm going to do extracurricularly. I got to nail the books, okay? I got to figure out how I'm going to pay for school the next year. And we go sort of step by step, right? And then we get to senior year, we're like, okay, what are we going to do? I got to figure out how that's, I just nailed the requirements for my major, feeling great. What's next, right? And that's the wrong frame. So just changing the frame to solving for senior year, working back, gives you the ability to put some structure around it. And then the outcrop is this, right? It's the difference between the curvy line, the undergraduate trajectory, the decisions that we make, how we integrate our academics with our with the career preparation and the recruiting process preparation. And essentially, when I was an undergrad, I was this guy. And almost, I would argue, the vast majority of folks, black, brown, or white, candidly, are here. And that's why most folks don't hit the bar. But the opportunity to close that gap by doing a number of things is, we've proven that it can be done. And it can be done on a much broader scale. So what would be the benefits for you all? And I would argue that, number one, consistently strong career, placement outcomes, and that's going to, leads to a number of great benefits: higher earnings, faster debt repayment, higher alumni satisfaction, which translates to giving. But secondly, this would put you in the position to have a differentiated career services offering, right? And if I were a student or a parent saying, where do I want to send my son or daughter to school, if I knew that if you had some gaudy stats on placements in careers, and if you could communicate to the student who's applying, deciding where to matriculate, we've got this killer curriculum that's built on top of what you can do in the classroom that drives great results. I think that would influence my decision as to where I attended school. It's going to help you broaden the current relationships that you have with employers and graduate schools, because they're going to think even more highly of the talent that you have. And then you're going to have a set of, you're going to have a level of data that you haven't had before, not just real time, but also really understanding where what's working and what's not. And the last piece, I think, is one I want to discuss about, or this piece about accountability. Love your thoughts on, but I think this shifts the accountability to the student. Right now, students come to college and they think, I got to do my academic work, and then the university's gonna help me figure out what I want to do. And we got career services, and it's sort of, there's a lot of ambiguity, and I would argue that this approach, in a curated way, it turns the career preparation component to look a lot more like the classroom experience. where you got requirements, you got major, you have a bar, you have a build up to that, and if you get it done, and we're going to give you the resources and the advice and the support to get it done, but if you don't, that's on you, right? So I think it changes the dynamics a little bit, and should support. It should be a great platform for your alumni who want to help, whether they're volunteers doing a mock interview or a resume review for free, or folks who are out with experience who love your university, who actually have, who can be coaches. And then finally, I think opportunities for cost savings in your existing career services operation. So what could a pilot look like? Last two slides. We think it could look like 400 or 500 students distributed between freshman through senior year. Define 2 or 3 achievement profiles. Okay, and select and engage a group of relevant partners from employers, and then just crank out, evaluate the pilot group and the outcomes and the progress metrics versus a control group, and do it over the course of a couple years with an interim assessment, and then look at the data, see what's working. I think at the very minimum, you have an incredible set of learnings around what your students are doing and what's winning and what's not. So I'll close there, and maybe to open up for Q&A, and I wanted to sort of try to frame the Q&A with 3 questions for you all, and that I don't think I have the answers to. You all have much better perspective, which, and the first one is really about, what would it take institutionally for you all to get comfortable partnering with an outside group, whoever it is, okay, in this space, in the career services space. Okay? Second is, how would you define success? What would the metrics be? What metrics would be most important to you? And then, how and who? How do you fund it? How do you pay for it? Assuming that this is somewhere in the range of $1,000 to $2,000 per student per year. Okay? Is it philanthropy? Is it cost savings elsewhere, or is it can we get the employers to pay for it? What can the students shoulder? Can you wrap it into their financing package and loans? You all have the best insight of that. I'll close there and start. Kathleen, do we want to?
Good morning. So, John, part of the challenge with the partnering, say with MLT, and I'm from Spelman, of course, we've been working with you guys for many years, is that we had this discussion among the Career Center directors last week, is with an organization like yours, you begin to compete for who's really the provider of the students, meaning that if the institution, let's just say in this case Spelman, is providing these outstanding students, and then they're sending them to MLT, and then let's just say the corporations begin to look at MLT as the provider, that can actually take dollars away from the institution. Mm. And so in terms of monetizing this thing, that becomes problematic because now you're almost competing. You understand where I'm coming from?
Yeah, so the question is, are you, is the organization that's supporting in between going to be perceived by the employer as, or by the school as competing for the who is responsible, right? And who should be compensated? So as it relates to your funders, right? So that great point. Other thoughts?
Well, I guess I just have a follow-up question to that, which would mean it would seem that you would be able to show an ROI on the advancement side. Mm-hmm. So is that something that you consider, and is that something that institutions here are considering when looking at career services? Is there a connection to advancement of the institution and donations from your alumni base because they're in a better position from an economic mobility standpoint? And I'm curious to know your thoughts about that.
The other side of that also is not just from alumni, but if corporations or employers are seeing better career outcomes, hiring more people than they were before, are they going to be more excited about the university? Right? Will philanthropists be more excited about the university because they're seeing them do things that other schools are not doing in terms of outcomes for their students and economic mobility. I think that's the other side of it. I would argue, again, my expectation would be that you would see, a meaningful, with an improved story and outcomes for your students, you're going to attract a broader set of employers, philanthropic funders, and you have higher satisfaction and more excitement among your alumni community. That's what the expectation would be. But I think your point is, as you're getting there, that's going to be one of the challenges. How do you balance that when you're on the path there until you've proven it? Yeah.
And probably that should be a metric that should be measured, right?
Absolutely.
In your metrics outcomes.
Michael,
Yeah.
here.
What's your capacity to scale?
We have it. I mean, it's just a matter of, we've got the model, right? We've proven it. So we just have to, we've got the coaching network. We could be, we could do all this. So this is just about capital.
50,000 students in the CPI.
Yeah.
I mean,
This is just about capital, nothing more.
okay.
Okay, we've got the expertise, we got the coaching network, we can scale, we got technology. We just have to, all we need is capital to do it. Right? I'm not going to build it to that scale until we've got folks who, till we've got the folks who want to use it. But that's the only concern.
So John,
Yes.
Maurice Washington from Morehouse College. You mentioned the coaching. You said coaching was 10 to 15 touch points
Yes.
over a course of an academic year or course of a calendar year.
Yeah.
Are those coaches professionals who are coming out of the private sector or their combination?
Yeah.
And you mentioned also that they should be paid.
Mm-hmm.
So talk to us a little bit about how that gets done in the context of an academic, context.
Right. So coaches are experienced professionals in the professionals with experience in the careers that the students aspire to get into. Right. So that might be, someone who wants to be work in a museum and become a curator. Okay, on that path, got to find the coach would have experience there. Someone who wants to be a software developer in the tech company, experience there. Wall Street, experience there. So experience, understanding, personal experience with the bar. Okay, and that person will be a combination. There will be a combination of face-to-face, video, telephone. And the pay, so our coaches at MLT now, we've got tens of them. They are a combination of full-time staff, half-time staff, and folks who are coaching 5 or 6 fellows. Okay, so the point is that it's from a university standpoint, what you're paying is the cost you have to cover is a cost per student that includes the coaching and the curriculum and the platform, right? And so you're not employing anybody. We're doing the employing, right? And we're covering a per student cost. So this is back end on our side, right? Not on your side, right? But your alums or people in your network who who have the kind of experience that could be a job opportunity for them, okay? Or it could be volunteer. Person who wants to do a one-off, resume review or mock interview or piece of advice relative to their industry in their career track. Okay?
Thank you.
John, on this side.
Yeah,
Yes.
question on the bar
Yes.
and helping our schools and career services departments actually support their students in achieving that bar. My name is Talia Givens from UNCF,
Yeah.
and what we have found in many ways is that our corporations need additional education and understanding our students and the value that they're bringing into their corporations for diversity. They want diverse candidates, but those that are meeting a bar, a certain bar. But how can we equip our career services departments and our schools to help work with corporations to really articulate to them the value of our students and the education that they're receiving, even though they may not come from traditional backgrounds, into their companies, so that the bar isn't lowered, but rather extended for students that are coming from our schools.
And so when you say extended, how do you define that?
Extended in the essence of you're not taking a student out of the process of getting an opportunity because they don't fit a certain, pedigree.
Yeah, yeah. So the question is, how can career service offices engage companies so that they appreciate the talent, and even though that talent may come from different backgrounds than most of the folks they have in their organizations right now.
Right, and actually cultivate that that diversity that's coming into their company, so that they don't get in and then don't stay in the industry because they're not getting the support that they need.
Right. So first thing, I think what we find, and you guys in the career service office, I think do a pretty good job of this, which is getting some of these companies on campus so they can meet the folks and experience the talent and get exposed to a broader range of folks. Okay. But I think the challenge here is it goes back to, I don't know if we this slide here, which is we're not going to succeed if we expect these companies to have a different bar, right? And so we got to figure out what that bar is, and then we've got to figure out how do we teach to that test. And I say that collectively. I think what we see is that once companies start, employers start hiring folks that look different and from different backgrounds, and they're having success, that's what changes their view. So they want more, and they want more. So what we got to do is we got to get folks in the door. We got to get employers to campus, okay, and we've got to facilitate more interaction, and then we've got to get folks going, and I think part of this is just an exposure, and I would argue, it's an exposure gap. But on our end, we've got to make sure that our students are clear what that bar is that they have to hit, and that we've got to give them the coaching and the prep to hit it. Yes.
Myra Burnett, Spelman College.
Yes.
My question is about the bar itself and the fact, I'm wondering how do you accommodate in your model the fact that the bar is not static,
Yes.
but that it is in fact changing and changing quickly?
Right. So, great question. Right. So, the bar, so when you say static, are we saying it was different 5 years ago than it was today for that same job?
Yes.
Right. So, the good news is that if you have the data on who they've hired over the past 12 months, right? What they look like, not the job description that probably hasn't changed, okay? But the data on who they've hired. What were their skills? What was their experience and accomplishments, and so forth? That's what allows you to stay up to date, because you just ask them. So don't tell me about what you're looking for people who are strong communicators. Just show me the resumes and the profiles in your database of the people who you hired that are now high performers in the last year. And that's going to change, right? But if I have that, but I have the updated data, right? And then the other piece of the evolving bar is once folks join an organization, right, and they're thinking about what's the next step in terms of being promoted and progressing, right? This bar is even more important. And companies do a horrible job of telling their own employees what the bar is to get promoted. So that's the second part of the struggle that we're focused on, which is advancement within organizations. But on the way in, the way to stay current is just to focus this on clear understanding of who they've hired historically, right? And then to your point earlier is then you can have the conversation about, well, we could stretch, we could be flexible on the following things, right? For a candidate that brings something, some diverse perspective to the table. But the starting point has to be, what does the person look like that you've been hiring, and then we can broaden from there. But if you don't know that, I think as a baseline, you're going to struggle. But I do think that that allows you to, focusing on it that way allows you to stay current.
We have
what
a
that bar
last
is.
question here in the front. There was somebody who has, oh, you have the mic.
Good morning. Good morning.
Oh, how are you?
How you doing?
Yeah.
Excellent presentation. I'm from Jarvis Christian College in Texas, and we started an employer faculty advisory committee so we could bridge that gap between what the employers want. And I think what you're doing here is excellent to help bridge that gap as well. And I think coaching is perfect. And I think that colleges should do what you suggest, in that we have coaches come in to work with our students.
Thank you.
John, one more question over here.
Yes.
Hi, Tiara Hector, Clark Atlanta University. Just a question. One of the slides talked about the comprehensive data analytics. Is that something that you all will provide if our students are going through the process and succeeding, or we have to ask the student for that information? Because that's kind of a fuzzy area as far as reporting where they're going and what they're doing and all that type of
Right.
stuff.
So that's where I would need your help, right? Is that, that we're going to have the data, right? And up front, we'd have to decide what the, with what the rules were. And we'd have to have the student sign off on access to, to different aspects of that data. But we could make that, a requirement for the student of doing this. So I think we can define this sort of with the way we want. I think there are probably some parameters within the university environment as it relates to grades and who gets how that I'm not an expert on that, but I know that we could figure that out. But I do think we'd have a lot of really rich data about engagement, but about progress, and that would be helpful for you to have access to. If we had to capture it in a kind of meta group way. To protect, to address any privacy issues, I'm sure we could do that and still be able to give you the trends. But that's something that we would work with you on to figure out.
So
It's a great question.
So this
Yeah.
has been really, really helpful. Okay,
Sorry.
Sure.
So I wonder about the issue of, and I think Talia might have been trying to get at this in some of the questions, authenticity, preparation, the bar is assimilation, and to what extent you are not challenging some of the culture of the hirer, which is discriminatory and inherently, and you're force feeding the young person into just mimicking what they're finding in the culture as opposed to who they really are.
Right. So great point. So my view on this, Michael, is that if we understand the bar, that's the starting point for the discussion around, you guys, this bar is making, for discussion that goes like this. This bar is, unfairly prejudicing folks who come from different backgrounds, right? Because we're also mapping out how did that person get there, right? From in terms of who was leaning in on their behalf, right? Unless we know the data on how they got there and what they actually look like, then we can't have a candid conversation with these organizations around, well, this is rigged, right? And we have, I can't tell you how many stories we see, okay, when we're placing folks at corporations that are, and this is, you see it even worse when you're talking about experienced hiring, senior folks or mid-level folks, and they're looking to you to, hey, we'd love to see some great candidates. But at the same time, the people who are the hiring, people who are would be managing the folks that you would tee up, they're out there sourcing in their own friend, family networks. Okay, they're doing it. They can do it faster to find the right candidate than you can find, the same person, the person who hits the bar, who's diverse, right? But if you can't surface that, if you don't know how they're doing it inside and what bar they're hitting and what their process is, then we're just. I think we're having that conversation from a position of weakness. So my point is that this is a balance that we're going to have to strike, okay? But in order to have the candid conversations, you got to have the data and be able to challenge them on how their process works and what the profile of these candidates really is. Because a lot of times, they're out there, here's this great job description, but if they're only hiring people who look very different from that, how can you compete? Right? And that's the insight, is that you got to know those things before you can have the discussion and move the needle on changing the way these practices are.
Excuse me.
Yes.
You used the term that disturbs me.
Okay.
You said the right candidate opposed to the acceptable candidate. And basically what these industries are doing is hiring acceptable candidates that they see fits their organization, not necessarily the right candidate. Because the right candidate could be a female. It could be.
Right. So did I use right candidate or did I use acceptable candidate?
Right candidate. I'm saying it's the acceptable candidate that they're really looking for.
That they're looking for, right?
Exactly.
And we're talking about what they should be looking for is the right candidate.
Exactly, but you know, over the 40 years that we've been moving in this direction of minorities coming out of engineering schools or business schools going into industry, I find it just appalling that they haven't come to any conclusion over 40 years of what this candidate should look like if he or she is black or Hispanic. I just can't figure that out. I mean, have they moved into this blindly and have no interest in learning?
Right, and that's why I argue, this is why, you know, the work that we're all doing is so important, because once we have critical mass of black and brown folks who are making these decisions, everything changes. Okay, in the employer side. Okay? I don't agree with you on
Yeah.
that. Okay.
Well, so the reason that we
I
have.
think I'm more optimistic.
John, this has been really thought-provoking, as you can see. The reason that we wanted John to give this presentation is really to show you where the bar is on the work of the design question, right? This is an organization that's focused full-time on this design question. And so if we're not experts, as most of us are not, on what happens to our students when the journey leaves our four walls, we need to partner with people who are. And what does that look like at a high bar level? At an excellence level. And so that's why we wanted John to come in and kind of show us where that bar is, and I think ask some of the hard questions about how do you feel like you need to build this capability in your career service offices? Can you? I think the answer in modern times is these areas are becoming so specialized, so fast changing, so complex that the answer is usually no, unless you're Google or Amazon, right? That we really need to think about how to partner. And we're not telling you that John is the organization that we're endorsing as the partner, but he's showing us where the bar is. And we thank you very much for that. So.